Hello and welcome to the Sketch Wave. I'm JoelCreate. He's James Julier, and this is episode 4 of the Sketch Wave. James, how have you been, mate? It's been a couple of weeks since we recorded our first few episodes.
Indeed, yeah, been really good. Been pretty busy doing all sorts of art, traditional and digital, obviously tutorials as well. How about yourself?
I'm very good. I've actually had a week off, which has been ideal. Time to disconnect. I've spent a week in Turkey, which was fantastic. Sat by the pool for the week, so yeah, nice and rested. Hopefully, the tan resembles how much time I actually sat in the sun, which is awesome. But while I was away, we actually launched the Sketchwave, which has been really exciting. I've wanted to press the button for days since we recorded our first few episodes, but
Very
we
much.
held fire a little bit and we launched it just so that you guys can subscribe to the channel, of course, and support us on the socials. But by the time you're watching this, it's already been out for a little while. But we do want to say, because we're recording this just before the first few episodes go out, we just want to thank everybody for all of their support on the channel. We've had so many comments across like our Instagrams, Facebook, everywhere that we've posted some of the sort of sneak peeks for it. And James, I think you can agree, some of the comments have been really lovely and everybody's super excited about the channel.
Yeah, and like we are ourselves, and it's been really great to see that there is actually people wanting this kind of content. I think we're getting used to just doing our tutorials, and to branch into something different is really exciting for us, first and foremost. So yeah, if we have a group of people, an audience that are interested in this, then that's brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone referred to us as there's not been a bigger team up since Avengers Endgame. So, it's quite a compliment.
Mm.
But yes, let's get into our main subject for today's show. And that is, will AI replace digital artists? This topic, AI as a whole right now, artificial intelligence, in case you don't know, is absolutely everywhere. It is replacing every job that you can imagine, apparently so. And one of which we want to discuss is it taking the jobs of digital artists? Will digital artists be replaced fully? And sort of break that down as to what we think about it and also if we use it. So I think sort of the first thing is to say, I'm going to bat it to you, James, is first of all, how do you feel about digital art in our space? I don't want to sort of branch out too much because, it covers so many different sort of niches, but in our niche, not specifically Procreate, but digital art as a whole, how do you feel about AI at the
Sure.
moment?
It's difficult not to be at least a little bit concerned. I think that the impact of it is going to be enormous, and arguably it already has been enormous. I think it's taken a while to get digital art to the point where people actually take it seriously. First of all, people don't understand it in the wider kind of public, I think, initially. And to get people on board with it has taken a few years. And you say to people, "A digital painting," and they go, "Well, that's not a real painting," or, digital art. And they just don't really understand that it's an artist creating it and not just a computer doing it. And so
Mm.
now we've got actual art that really hasn't had an artist's hand involved in it, and it is the computer doing it. And so a lot of the kind of prejudice against digital art, I think, has, come to fruition in some ways. And I think for some people, I think it's going to turn them off digital art as a whole, potentially. And that's a concern, I think, for us as artists looking
Mm.
to continue creating new and interesting things, not just as YouTubers, but as artists too. I love digital art. I think it's an amazing format, and I don't really want it to die a death. I want it to keep thriving and going really strong into the future.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. I think one thing you kind of sort of were leaning towards there a little bit is like credibility of
Mm,
sort of digital art. Like you mentioned, there's always been something before something, and then when the new
yeah,
thing comes around, the people who were in that sort of space before say the new thing is not as good. It doesn't have as much value as the thing that came before it, and that's
sure.
always been the case, and that will always continue to be the case going forward with everything in life. There'll be certain people that feel like football was better back in the day than it is now, and it stretches across loads of different things. But in digital art, especially, there's always, as you said, been kind of a bit of a stigma to say that's not real art. You're not
Yeah.
actually doing X, Y, and Z. And I think it would be quite an interesting sort of topic to actually break down one day of, how many sort of tiers has this happened before in terms of, was there ever like multiple tiers in more traditional spaces of, oh, that's not actual art, it should always be done with a pencil, or, something like that kind of thing. But the credibility, I think, is where it comes down to, which is part of the subject we're going to speak about in full anyway at some point. But for me, I think at the minute there's a bit of a shine that's being taken off of the space for us. I think, in a sense, that for people joining our world. So again, I want to keep it a bit close to what we do in our world. There is a certain level of comparison that people do. We spoke about it in previous episodes. I've always told everybody, comparison is the thief of joy. Do not look at anything else. Don't look at anybody else's journey. But when you look at what some of the AI image creating, the prompts of creating these beautiful digital images through an AI generator, they can put so much intricate details in there that would take you hours and hours and hours, and it creates an unrivaled level of expectation. For people that are just starting, you should not be thinking, I'm 32 hours into this, but I just need to keep going because I need to put this, that, and that is a ceiling that you are making that is just far too high. You need to bring it back down to like the core values, and a lot of those, it's styles that are very heavily layered, and at the beginning especially you want to learn how to just the foundations of creating a piece of art from start to finish. So for me, again, it creates like this really uneasy feeling for me of like a level of expectation with even less input. I don't want to get disrespectful, but we're going to end up probably treading on someone's toes, but I call them prompt masters, because you can write whatever you want into a generator and you can get whatever it spits back out and make a tweak here and a tweak there and so on. But in my mind, that is a click of a few minor changes, a few minor tweaks, and you are generating a whole new image or adding a whole new element to it with very little skill. And again, I'm probably going to tread on people's toes. I'm really sorry, but I don't really care. That's the whole point of this topic. And it's the back and forth of, again, the sort of style that came before it and the new age. So yeah, I mean, does that ceiling bother you in terms of the sort of expectation? Do you feel like it ever sort of layers on top of what you already do as a tutor to say, I need to be doing more?
I understand that there's going to be a comparison between the AI created images that, like you say, that you may look at something that Midjourney or the other ones have created, and the level of complexity is right there to be seen. At a click of a button, you can create 20 different versions, and it is going to be very difficult to compete with that in some sense. And also the feeling that while you're spending 20, 30 hours or more on one piece, there's been 1,000 different images created by another person putting in keywords. It's difficult to balance the two out. But then I suppose it comes down to integrity and authenticity, and without casting judgment on people who do AI generative work, I think that there's a certain pleasure to be taken in knowing every grain of that image, every gesture that you've put in there, every brushstroke, you've owned it and you understand every detail of it. I think to put in some words and have it spit out an image, and then you present that to the world as yours, and you might not have even noticed so much in that image. You might not have looked at it very much yourself, even, and to present that as yours, and you might notice later on it's got all sorts of details in there that you don't and didn't know were there to begin with. And so I think the ownership then becomes a little bit suspect. So it's going to be hard to compete with it, but then I think that there's a benefit to having owned it, created it, and it is genuinely an expression come from your own conscious, your own subconscious, whatever that may be. And that's another aspect, is that I think when you're actually putting your hand into a piece of artwork and you're creating things, you're almost digging into the subconscious and finding things within yourself and that journey. And I don't think that the process of digital art is going to allow you to discover things about yourself. And maybe that not everyone is into that, and it might just be that they want to create some beautiful images and present that either to put it on their own wall or present that to their friends and family. But I think the reward from having produced it yourself is going to be obviously different when you've actually manually created it, as opposed to just putting a few words and pressed enter.
Yeah, I think one thing you said there, the word reward, because in, again, traditional through to digital art through to AI art, there is a certain amount of risk that you have to take in order to get a little bit more reward from your design. So what I mean is, in traditional art, you have to have already sort of very much visualized in your mind, I know what I'm going to put here. I'm going to add a squirrel on this branch. But they need to know I'm going to do it, because if I do this in a certain way, the time to replace that or fix the image before then reintroducing it again is a huge effort. It's a huge effort. It's a skill in itself. And then in digital art, we're lucky enough that we can create a layer, we can separate it from the image, we can add the squirrel in, and we can delete that layer straight away, go again. But again, then when we get to AI art, it's add a squirrel. Boom, 20 different squirrels on there. Don't like any of them. Do it again. And you can have the tiniest spark with AI art, and then it generates so many results, but the craft of that actual concept isn't there as much for me. I can already see that I'm going down definitely a bit more of a negative avenue, and I don't want to come across like that, because there are so many aspects to AI that are extremely useful. There are, we use it. This entire podcast, the final result, the transcript that's provided is AI generated. The editing is so quick and easy. There are things in my day job that we use AI for, And if you are using it, and say you're a business and you don't have any sort of design skills yourself, but you don't have a designer in house, and you're a startup business and you just need a graphic for your website, I get it. I totally get it. Use
Definitely.
the AI. Definitely, it saves you. That's like diving into a world that you don't understand or can't craft. You, as a sort of the owner of that business, you just need that quick element or asset for your website. And again, there are so many ways that AI is so useful. But getting back to where we are in terms of our space, do you think it will deter people from picking up an iPad and an Apple Pencil, or even traditional art, if we want to sort of scale back again? Do you think it would deter people from doing that because they can have so much fun with an AI generator and put something together that can go on Instagram, and it took them 5 minutes, and if it gets 1,000 likes, excellent. But if again, we should speak about the risk versus reward, crafting something for hours versus the prompts.
I think there's a difference between the different motives to creating artwork, I suppose. There's maybe the desire to present it and get, the praise and the respect from peers or, the public for what you've managed to present. But then there's also the learning side and the discovery and the growing that can be done through learning the actual skills. So it may deter some people from picking up an iPad and learning the skills, but I have to question to what extent that group of people may have wanting to invest that much time in it anyway, because I think that the motives are different. I think if you're genuinely looking to grow within yourself and learn how to express yourself visually, then I think you will do that even if just for your personal experience, even if you've got no one to show it to other than people who you live with. Then I think you're going to do that regardless. I think that you'll want to do that as an exercise in terms of kind of personal growth and creative sort of expression. And I don't think necessarily it's going to put off that many people. But we'll have to see, won't we, really?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's also very important that I also state at this point, I have utilized AI tools and helped me in a lot of the creative block moments in what we do. I think it's extremely difficult for someone in our space to be doing what we do for yourself even longer. But week in, week out concepts. And when that moment of creative block happens and you just need some inspiration that you can't find on Google Images and you can't find it on Pinterest, and you just sat there and you're waiting for that one thing to just spark you into life. Because I'll sit there numerous times and just be like, yeah, I like a landscape, but what about it? What can we do that's different? What can we, that's it. That's as far as the thought goes. So for me, I have utilized AI tools to just generate concepts, even if it's just like a palette that I like the look of, kind of thing. And I think that is a really good for me, it's a really good use case for how it can be used in our space, but responsibly. Because again, depending on who you are, if you are someone who works in a studio, day in, day out, you are making concepts over and over and over again. The imagination can only take so much punishment without rest. Up until me going away last week, my mind was fried. I was exhausted. And those ideas they won't come to the front. They're still there. Your creativity is still there, but your creativity has to be something that's nurtured. And it also, you have to have seen things in life visually to then want to expand on that a little bit, whether it be I want to start drawing certain things, whether it's like a particular flower in a certain way, or a landscape or space theme or something like that. These ideas of content and subjects and details can only come if you've seen something that resembles exactly that, and that's where I think these things can be used responsibly. How do you feel about that in our space?
I think that it's inevitable that it's going to be used as reference for at least some details in artwork. I think that that's likely to become its future use for most artists, I think. And I think it's easy to just, on impulse, just sort of reject the whole notion of AI. But then it's a tool in your toolkit that it could be extremely useful. I know even when I do traditional painting still, I will sometimes just run some texture research. Instead of Googling for images, I might just go onto a AI generative search engine and just see what textures it can generate, see what things that are already out there that will help me with color palettes, like you say, and textures that I could use even on traditional paintings, an image in the background, that I did actually find some textures as inspiration, as a starting point. Now, I didn't copy it, but it was there as a reference for my traditional work.
And references is not cheating. This is a topic that comes up all the time. References are not cheating. You have to see things. This is what I'm saying. You have to have seen these things to understand how the bark on a tree wraps round at certain angles, or the bumps and lumps that trees naturally create. So, and you can only see that again from photography. And I know, sort of going back to what I was saying a second ago, that might sound hypocritical in a sense, where I was sort of saying about the prompts at the beginning. I want to separate them clearly, because again, using AI for like reference and then just using AI to create the image and posting that as my work are two different things in my mind. Because if you're using from reference, it is the beginning point in the craft of what you're about to make. Again, you could even be midway through the journey. It doesn't really matter. But when you need that texture, or you can't quite see it in your mind, you just want to get that reference. That's where it can come in and sort of assist you. I think that's very much the key, is assisting along the journey rather than the be all and end all of the creative process.
And I think that wherever you use it, I think as long as you're using it in a way that helps you grow creatively and it helps your workflow. And I think that I wouldn't, certainly in my personal work especially, I wouldn't want to just entirely slavishly copy an image I've found through AI, but I will use it at various points, whether it's at the beginning just to kickstart and get my imagination going a little bit, or whether it's halfway through and there's a particular detail and I'm just looking for the textual part of it. And I think that it can just be integrated in at various points of your workflow. And I don't think that there needs to be a stigma about using references at all. Most of my images, in the past have used some form of reference, or I'll get halfway through the image in the past, and then I think, damn, I really want to include some kind of wood grain or something, and it's my idea, but then I have to go
Mm.
and research it because, you may have a lot of experience in a particular image, and I've drawn the human skeleton a lot, I've drawn trees a lot, but then there might be certain types of lichen or moss textures that I can remember them to a point, but I can't remember them enough to do them from memory completely. So having some kind of visual source, and it may be that going out with a camera is the best choice, but that's dependent on weather. It's dependent on the subject matter being close to hand, and it's not always the best thing to have to go out and traipse through the woods if you're looking for a particular tree image. And you might just not have time, I mean, I'm a parent. Taking the kids to school and picking them up takes a big part of my week up, apart from doing the YouTube videos and all the other responsibilities that I have. So if it's something that I can just find a reference for using AI, then I think it's really good. And one of the benefits of using AI, I think also, is that it isn't an image owned by anybody as such, because okay, yes, it's been pulled from thousands, maybe millions of images that are out there on the internet, but the specifics of that image don't exist anywhere else in the world. And every time, if you've asked it to generate it or somebody else has generated it through AI, then it genuinely is an original image, although it might be similar to 100 or 1,000 different ones. There might be a certain cluster of textures that you find inspiring in the one that has been created for you, as opposed to the others, and then you can integrate that in a piece of work. And it ends up with something that's an amalgam of, something that you found as a reference and then your own ideas. And it's, I suppose, in a sense, it's copying less from another human's work in a strange kind of way.
Mm. Do you think that there will be a time where digital art, if it being printed in physical form, obviously, and a painting side by side will hold the same value?
No. Not in terms of a traditional painting. I think that digital art on the whole has struggled with that anyway. And I think even more so now that we're getting into the AI territory. I think that it's always going to be difficult. And I guess that was the justification for NFTs, and the whole buzz around that
Yeah.
for a short period. It seems to have gone away now. I've not really heard much about it. But there was a need for NFTs in order to give digital art that sense of that original, that one-offness, somehow the origin point or the official version that a painting in traditional materials never suffers from. I think that to a certain extent, there's a little bit of mysticism around the kind of original canvas painting that the artist has actually touched. And there's some kind of sacredness around the object that I've kind of argued against in the past, because for me, in some ways, it's about the image that you express rather than the tangible quality of it. For example, some of my favorite artists, I've never seen their work in person. I've only ever seen their work printed in books or on a screen. So in terms of the way it's consumed, I think if you're going to consume a piece of art on a screen, then I don't think it matters too much what the format, the medium is, whether it's traditional or digital. I think if you're going to see it in person, printed, or on a canvas, I think there's a world of difference. And I think the traditional materials win out every time on that front. But I'm both. I do digital artwork too, and obviously my channel promotes and encourages digital work. So I do see very much the value in the growth and the learning and the journey. And if your image is going to be presented on a screen, then I think digital art makes sense.
Yeah, I think if you see, if there was an auction with two, one after the other, a traditional painting, and then okay, let's put all three. I keep raising them. If you had one back to back to back, I think digital art and the traditional art has far more value because of the craft, the time and the craft of that creation. And I'm not saying that time necessarily is the value. Time isn't the value, but it's the skill of that individual, the journey, as you say, that they went through creating that concept and the design and the mistakes along the way, or the way that certain things have been smudged together, that they purposely smudged together, the blending of colors or whatever it may be. That process, experimentation, mistakes, mistakes, happy little mistakes, all of those things along that journey is part of the value of that product. And don't get me wrong, as I mentioned, yes, you can keep tweaking and tweaking an image, but it doesn't hold the same value. Now, also, I think the concept of the value is determined by the audience that you're talking to, should I say? Because if you're talking to someone who is a general member of the public and you show them 3 photos and one's a traditional, one's digital, and one's AI, they're going to pick whichever one is the fanciest, or is maybe a detail, or sometimes it's simply the brightest and most colorful, compared to something that's a little bit more muted. But that's where unless you're in those spaces, you're in those auctions, you don't get to understand that world too much. Don't get me wrong, I'm not in that space, but I get it and I understand it, in a sense that if you're in that space and you are somebody who really loves that person's work, you understand it for the journey that they went on making it, and that's what you want to buy. You want to buy that creative process, which has more value again in the traditional and even digital art space, because digital art beyond Procreate is illustration as well, in Adobe Illustrator or any other one of those apps, because you'll see the road signs, for example, down here in Devon. When you go to anywhere, each one, the towns have all got their own beautiful minimalistic illustration of like the seafront or whatever it may be, and they are as beautiful as a painting that could have taken hours. It doesn't matter. It's the craft of creating and expressing that space by that artist. There's actually a lady, I will not get her name, and I do apologize, and I'll try and find some of her work, but she has done pretty much every town that you can think of in sort of the southwest. She's very famous for it. And again, they are just really beautiful breakdowns and minimalism of the landscapes, but that's her style and craft, so much that I value her work, even though it may have been done in Illustrator, or it might have started as a sketch even, but that work has so much value because of who she is and what she does and how she sees the world. That's the difference. It's how she sees it, not how a AI image generator thinks you want to see it.
Yeah, I mean, my concerns, I think if I have concerns, are that people may just use AI technology to generate their own images and actually bypass the need for the middleman, the artist, if you like. If they can, for example, put in some words, and I'm not talking about artists doing this, I'm talking about the general public. If the general public or a member of the public decides, well, I want an image and I want it to look kind of in this vein. I know roughly the kind of subject matter I want, and it's just an image I want printed out, and I want to put it in a certain room in my house. I want it to be inexpensive. Well, then I can go onto Midjourney or other AI generators, and I can put in that request. It'll produce a piece of work for me, and maybe the consumer, might be satisfied with that and actually not care so much, because they feel that in some sense they've had a hand in creating that image, so they can have a bit more ownership over it. And I think that's a potential risk, is that a lot of people will just use AI to generate their own images and bypass the need for an artist to have done it for them.
That's a really good segue into another question I have, is about bypassing the artist. If you saw a new channel that had been made by someone and the video is completely AI generated, AI voiced, everything, and it was a Procreate tutorial from start to finish, let's not get into the complexity of how that would even work, but if you saw that and it guided them step by step through that process, how alarmed would you be by that?
Me personally, well, it would mean it would be bad news for us as creators, certainly.
Yeah.
Um, I don't. I have thought seriously about this question. It's difficult to not think about this when you're in a digital space, creating digital content. Well, AI may potentially start creating things in this territory. I do think you're right. I think it's going to be an extremely difficult thing for AI to understand. I think it could probably kind of take things that are already out there and kind of create an amalgam in the same way that it does currently. But I can't help but think it would be disjointed and unclear in its instruction. I think it would fail to understand how a human would have difficulty and fail to understand how it needed to explain certain parts of a tutorial. And maybe not in the future, but I think certainly it's years away from that. And maybe I'm being very naive, but that's what I believe.
But what if it was trained off of us?
I still think it would. Yeah. I think it would come up with a general version of things we've already done. I think it would fail to come up with something original and step into new territory. I think that it would, and I can't help but think that it would fail to understand, because when you think about what we have to do, we have to understand, we have to find an image as an inspiration, we have to think of an image as an inspiration, then we have to know how to create it, then we have to know how to deconstruct it into ways that are easy to understand for other people, then we have to explain it in ways that can be understood, not just understand how it can be broken down, and communicate that. And I think that there's a lots of layers of complexity there that an AI, I think it's going to struggle with for the time being. And I think that the human is going to be a necessary part of that for a long while. And like in the classroom in general, I don't think we're quite at the stage where AI will be the teacher and children will be at home looking at a screen. I don't think we're quite at that stage yet. I think we need people.
Well, see, that's the thing I saw this week. I think it was OpenAI's new event, or maybe it was ChatGPT. I can't remember. One's under the other anyway. But there was a child with an iPad, and they had two apps open. They had ChatGPT open on one side, I think it was, and on the right-hand side, they had a maths equation. And it was the new version of the ChatGPT where you could speak to it with the new voice, which is apparently Scarlett Johansson. They apparently is very close and bizarrely flirty, but whatever. The app was able to be given video recording permission to the iPad so it could see what was on the screen. And the parent asked the chatbot to check the question and explain it in a way for their 9-year-old child, in a way that the 9-year-old child would understand. And it broke it down in a way that it was a private tutor. It was complete. For me, that's where this question has stemmed from, because for me, seeing how that was able to break it down in a sense for a young person to understand this maths equation and the angles and trying to find certain, whatever the question was and the answer to it, how it was able to break it down, but it was able to, first of all, explain the concept and then go to sort of direct them in a path that said this is where the answer is, and trying to guide them in a way that they understand then how to get to the solution of the maths equation. And for me, when I saw that, I couldn't help but think there is a way in which that could be used in our world. If that was open alongside Procreate and you said, guide me in the process now of drawing a tree, I think I personally don't think we are very far off of that being able to say, yeah, cool, I can draw your tree. Now, yes, they're at the beginning, like all of these AI tools, they have an infancy stage. They're going to get things wrong. They can't generate photos at the minute with hands, because it just struggles so much. But then you've seen how, I've seen how some of the new video editor generators have come out and they've nailed it. And it's not been very long at all. And so for me, I can understand now that I think that could generate, I can help you draw a tree, start off by grabbing a brown tone and it maybe even give them the hex code, but it will lack a certain creativity and vision or understanding of lighting. I don't know, all those times, the rules in which we, like you say, we break an image down in the structure of it. But in my mind, I don't think we're I don't think we're that far off from what I can see at the minute of it being able to create something basic and
I
assisting
agree.
someone.
I I agree to that's certainly possible. I think there's something to be said about the individual personality of people though. And it might just be the delivery style and the personality of the person. It may be the visual style that people take on, that people like the use of the color palette. And an AI is probably more likely to find something very generic that it knows that the majority of people like, and therefore it's going to keep churning out similar content. I think what's interesting about people is that the idiosyncratic kind of taste and style and approach that real people have, I think is going to be something that will remain even when AI perhaps is creating something that's very generic and may appeal to a bulk of people, but there's always going to be something a little bit different that a real person can add to the equation, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's also important to remember it's not like digital art came along and then nobody's selling paintbrushes anymore. It's not,
No.
it's not going to be the be all and end all. Yes, you're going to be able to create assets for your website or something along those lines very quickly, or swap a background out, or change your t-shirt to something else very quickly. That's great. That's good. That's efficiency for work. I love that. But in terms of the creation, the actual sit down process of crafting your own skill, and I think that's where it comes down to mainly is people that want to in our space want to sit down and learn how to draw. And digital art gives them a little bit more, as I mentioned, freedom, expressive sort of tools that allow you to then backtrack very quick and easy. Again, layers, one of the best things that anyone can get their head around at the very beginning, using as many as they need to make life a lot easier to adjust their images and not do something that's going to be really hard to undo. But the craft of learning that, doing better than you did the last, adding something else that you didn't add the previous time, that's you and your journey and learning how to do things in a different way. I think I said it in a previous episode, but some of the work I'm currently doing tutorial wise, which some of it doesn't come out for a while, has gone down a slightly different avenue where I'm really experimenting with bold brushstrokes. And that is my journey still that I'm going down. And that's the same for everybody in this space, whether they start with simple tutorials of ours, that are the quick 20-minute ones, and then they move into the more detailed ones. You are slowly building up your courage and confidence in yourself to then go ahead and tackle something. And the reward that you get back from taking that risk, I'm gonna do that really tricky James Julier one, or the one that's like an hour or 2 hours or whatever it may be, essentially one that they look at the thumbnail and go, I can't do that, or they couldn't do it 6 months ago, but now that they've got the confidence to do it. It's that reward feeling of being like, I did that today. Like I can't, the reward of seeing that, for me, that some of the most rewarding things I've witnessed in my content creator journey is people have then sent me a photo and they've printed it out of them doing the tutorial and they've put it up on their wall. And to me, that is exactly that feeling of you enjoy what I crafted for a start. Again, this is where I've said before that our process is very rewarding because there's like an end goal that we get to see from our viewers. That process, that love and just confidence that you have had in yourself to then make that, and you've loved it so much that you've printed it. I just don't think there's a more rewarding feeling that you can look up on the wall and go, I made that, and I spent hours even on that canvas, but then it was the hours you did last week, and it was the hours that you did the week before, or the day before, and the day before that, and the build up of your process to get to where you are, that you're happy enough to tackle those larger projects and something that you really look at and go, wow, that was something I did.
Another thought I have about this is that I think there might be a little bit of a backlash against images that look too polished and too slick. I think people might really seek out authenticity and the human touch in things a little bit more. I think the more that the internet becomes almost polluted with at this point must be millions, if not billions, of AI generated images. How sensitized are we going to become to that type of content? when we now look at sort of movies, when we look at CGI, we're very critical of CGI now, and we almost don't want to see it at all. We want authenticity. We want, if it's a Star Wars movie, we want practical sets and practical props. We don't want CGI. I wonder whether it's going to go backwards a little bit. I don't think people will not want digital work, but we want something that doesn't look like it's created by AI anymore, and it shifts the way that people's styles evolve a little bit, and they favour things that look messier or clumsier or just somehow have of more of a random quality to it, and not quite as polished and slick. It might be that people want that real sense of hand created in a way that they've, perhaps not wanted in the past.
I think that's something that comes with time, to be honest, as well, in our space. In art, is, for me, again, at the minute, I'm really taking a lot of inspiration from artists that are very bold. And I think that comes from you understanding how an image is made to then go, wow, they just went bam, just chucked some bright orange in there. That doesn't make any, that orange doesn't feature anywhere at all. But they decided to put that one speck or bold streak. And why have they done it? But it doesn't matter why they've done it necessarily, because it's got my attention. And I know, looking at that, like, wow, that was really expressive, loose, free, and just, let's get it in. Let's see what happens. Let's have fun with it. That's the most important thing. It's just fun. That's what we always say about this space. It just needs to be fun. Listen, I think AI is something we're probably going to speak about multiple times on this podcast or show.
Definitely. I think there's lots more we could say on the subject, isn't there?
But with this space, AI is just going to move faster and faster, and we're going to miss certain things. But as always, guys, there's a link to a form in the description down below where you can submit a question that you can have read out. And it doesn't have to be AI related. It can be anything that you'd like us to discuss on the show. And while you're down there, there's also a link to our socials where you can support us on Instagram, TikTok, everywhere else that we are. There'll be a link to our link tree in the description down below. James, thank you as always, my friend, for a wonderful show and a great conversation about AI. We are going to cover this so many times. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe, turn on the bell as well, and drop a like and a comment down below. What do you think of AI? Is it ruining everything? Do you want to get rid of us and have an AI teach you how to draw something? We'll see you again in the next episode. Thanks for watching. We'll see you.
Bye-bye.